So, you find yourself sitting with your friends, stuck inside, because we're trying to be good, be self distancing from people. And you think, watching videos on a computer just isn't really cutting it. And, our TV is pretty small, and maybe we have people watching different things, and maybe this is just not working out. So you think, hey, why don't we just get a big new TV? Ooh, look at that. That's good. Now we have a problem. So now you want to figure out where you're going to put it, and you've got a nice piece of wall. That's good. Yeah. So you're like, okay, well, except I don't have any installers. How am I going to put this up? Well, I'll show you a few tips and tricks here that might help you out. First thing, you'll notice there's a little bit of tape. Ignore my wall hangers. We're not going to use those. See this little bit of tape right here? That is what we're pretending to be. Is where the top of the screen is going to be. So you look at the wall here, that's the top of where my screen is going to be. It's a good thing to decide on that first, because we'll need that for all of our stuff later. So then you get your TV out. There's my TV. And it's sitting there. I've already got the mounts on. I got a lovely inexpensive tilt mount for this, and I've installed it as per the manufacturer. And you see on these brand new TVs, they're actually thicker at the bottom. They actually screw into that thick part at the bottom. Make sure to use the right bolts and all that. And it's nice and tight. Not too tight, but make sure that it's installed as per instructions. Now you want to see, okay, well, I know where the mounts are. I know where I want it on the wall. How do I figure out where to put the screws? Okay, so here's a close-up shot of this is a thin profile tilt mount, which allows the monitor to tilt a little bit, which is nice. But you see it's got this piece here. This catches, and it mounts onto a piece of metal, this piece right here, that I currently have on the floor. This is the rail that actually mounts to the wall. And you'll see it has holes regularly along the way through. And mine came with a kit with a whole bunch of hardware in it. It came with two types of screws. These type, which is meant for what's called a solid wall, concrete wall. Most of you don't have this, so don't use this. This is a wood screw for going into a wooden stud. Most common homes, like standalone houses, will have wood studs. If you don't know what your wall's made of, then stop here. Because this is not something that you want to do unless you know exactly what your wall is made of. Since we built this house, I know that this wall is drywall with a 2x6 wooden studs. All I have to do is locate them. But the question is, I know how high my screen's supposed to be, and I know my little rail here has to go on the wall, and now I know exactly where these mounts fit. So here's the trick. In order to know exactly where I want to put this rail, I need to know the distance between the top of the screen, because that's where I know what's on the wall, and where that rail is supposed to be right here. So, I'll do a quick measure. And from here, it's about 11 inches. So, from my mark on the wall, I'm going to mark another piece of tape 11 inches down, and that's where I'm going to start figuring out where my TV is going to mount. Okay, then. Okay, we should take care of this. Make sure that you don't have anything like cat toys in the way when we're doing this. We don't really want to trip on anything. So, there's my piece of tape. Now I've gone and put a couple of other pieces of tape roughly where I want that to be. Now I'm using the green painter's tape, and the reason I'm using painter's tape is because two things. One is I'm intending on marking there instead of penciling on the wall, because erasing stuff off the wall doesn't work very well. Also, painter's tape peels off without taking the paint off, which is a good important thing. And if I drill my hole through the painter's tape, it'll keep the plaster from cracking too much. So that's what we're doing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find out exactly. So from the top here, 11. There's my mark. And that mark is going to be where the rail top is going to, so in order for the TV to show up at this level here. So we're trying to replicate all this stuff. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to use a real level. Sometimes these little things come with pre-made levels. Using your own level is a good idea because, well, it's just going to do a better job. Now, if things that aren't level don't bother you, then you don't need to worry about this step. But I assure you that everyone, level bothers them. Now you see, my level is good, and it's stretching across all my tape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the camera down and I'm going to pick a nice pencil mark across my tapes as my reference. Alright, so here's my mark, and this is going to be where this lovely rail, I'm going to see this properly, there we go. So there's my rail, and I'm going to line it up so that it's under that line all the way across. Realizing that doing this one-handed while holding a phone is probably the wrong way to do it, but I'll try my best. Next thing, we need to find the studs. Okay, so in order to find studs, we need a stud finder. I tried it on myself and it doesn't work, but it should be good for walls. Now, wooden studs in my wall here. This is my lovely room. Now there are some hints that you can use for locating approximately where studs would be. A good indication is that studs are going to be close to that outlet. Now, by the way, speaking of outlets, I know exactly what's in my wall here. So I know where the wiring for this goes. See that lovely outlet there? One thing that we want to do when we're installing something is we do not want to screw into anything in the wall that might be a problem, like electricity or other wiring, or in the case of what I had an accident downstairs at one point, a water line. So be sure you understand what's in your wall. Now, I happen to know this wall has a limited amount of stuff in it. I've got speakers up there. That's low voltage wiring, and it happens to know it goes up through the ceiling. And then I have power down here, which actually sticks low to the ground. And because the electrical installers that installed in this house did a good job, every place that the electrical goes through a stud, they put a little metal plate over that part of the stud, which means you can't accidentally screw a screw through a power cable. So if you are drilling or screwing into a stud and you find that it's super hard, that is an indication to stop, because that means there's a plate there and it's protecting you from hurting yourself. So in order to find a stud, I know it's approximately close to this switch. You put the stud finder, this one, you put it on a place where there isn't a stud, and I let it set. And then if I drag it along, it gets close to a stud, you can see the light come up. So that tells me that there's probably a higher density stud in that area. I can use this method to find approximately where my studs are, and I'm going to put a handy little bit of green tape in that approximate area. So I'm going to show this to you again. I've done some measurements. Now, one of the things I want to show you, my particular stud finder has to be reset. So you put it over a spot where you know there's probably not a stud. You hold it down and let it set. And then as you drag it closer to the stud, it will go the light will go up. Actually, because this wall is so dense, it's not going all the way up to the top and beeping, but some of them do beep. Now you notice I've got a point here just on the side where I think the center of the stud should be, because it's detecting the edge. So you see I've got two marks. One mark this way, and then I come from the other side. So from this side I go here. And when it gets to the top, you see there's a little bit of a gap. So between those two lines should be the center of my stud. So I use that for reference. And I've done that at 3 studs that I've located, and my studs are going to be approximately 16 inches between each other, because that's the standard width for this kind of stud installation. So I've just been double checking my measurements, because this is a great chance to always double check stuff, because we haven't drilled any holes yet, we haven't committed to anything yet. I wanted to double check and make sure I knew exactly where my studs were. You see my 2 marks between the areas where I'm pretty sure the center is. Right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my level and I'm going to put it sort of right between those 2 lines. Make sure that I've got sort of a vertical line up there. And now I'm going to see if I can juggle the camera and do this. I don't know if I can do this. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to do a pencil mark right there to make a nice line, just like I've made these, and that's going to represent where I believe the center of the stud is in each case. We're going to position everything up and see how we can do here. So here's one possible scenario. I've got my mounting bar here, got my tape, I've got my marks. This one you can see, this is the center one, nice and lined up with my mark. Love it. Oops. There we go, love it. But I've come across a little issue. So the other sides don't quite line up on my marks. And I want to make sure that I've got bolts in every stud I have possible. So something I have to keep in mind, how close I am, and the stud is 1.5 inches wide. So as long as I'm not too far away from that mark, I should be okay on all these spots, even though it's not quite right on the mark. And I'll test that when I'm doing my drilling. I will do a test drill for one on each spot, and make sure I'm drilling into actual wood and not into anything else. And as long as I'm biting into wood there, then I think we should be fine. So, a quick word about drill bits. So you have my bolt here, and I've got 2 drill bits here. And what I'm doing is I want to drill a pilot hole so that I'm not screwing the bolt right into the wood and making it possible to split that wood piece. So I need a pilot hole of some nature, but I also don't want the pilot hole to be too big. So you can see I've got 2 drill bits, and what I've done is I've measured the bit so that the shaft of the drill bit is about the same size as the middle of the bolt, so that it's actually smaller than the thread. So I'm making enough room for the bolt to screw in, but still have wood around for the thread to bite into, because that's the whole point. If it doesn't bite into it, won't hold on the wall, and the TV will fall off, and that's bad. But what I do is always err on the side of smaller first. So I've got 2 drill bits. I'm going to choose the small one first and see whether or not the bolt will screw in nicely. If it's too tight, then I'll use a slightly bigger bit to make the hole just a little bit wider so that it's easier to drive in. I can always make the hole bigger. I can't make it smaller. So I always start with a small bit first. Here we go. Oh, it's good. Excellent. So I'm just going to get a bolt in there. Make sure before I put anything else it's actually going into wood. Yeah, that's good. So it actually is biting into the wood. It's going to be a strong connection, so now I know that my hole is good here. Good. Now I'm going to start to put the actual rail up. We're going to put one on this, and then I'm going to use that to check level before I put the one on the opposite side. You know, I realized if I try and do this again, it's going to be easier with someone else filming it. At any rate, so this is what I can only do with one hand. I've got my first bolt in the spot I want. I've got it just pivoting that rail. And what this allows me to do, allows me to bring the rail up and kind of roughly find where I need to be. This allows me to check level before I drill the next hole. See, I have my lovely reference line, and I'm going to check level again with my level just to make sure it's still good even compared to my line. Mark my hole, do my drill, and then check everything again. Each time, checking a little bit more so that you don't end up getting yourself into a situation you don't like. All right, so there we go. I've got my second bolt in, just roughly. My first bolt, and there is level. Isn't it nice that my level fits nicely on this rail? But yeah, level's always good. Gotta double check that. Even if I wasn't quite level, you'll notice that these holes have a little bit of give, so I can make some fine adjustments once I get it all done. But now we've got everything roughly fitting where we want. I can put my extra bolts in as I need, and then I can actually start hanging this stuff up. Sounds good. So I've drilled all my holes, double checked them, and I was wood studs behind every single one, which is nice. Now I can actually take my reference tape off. I did have a little bit of paint pull off there, so I have to be a little more careful. But what's nice is kind of makes it a little cleaner. So that's the idea. Now I'm going to hang up my rail and see how it looks. There's the complete job. And there's the action shot. The nuts are just snugly done. I haven't over tightened them, but it's enough that the rail doesn't rattle. It's not going to fall off the wall. And since I've got 3 studs here, I'm very confident that this is going to hold exactly what I need. This mount is rated for the size of TV that I've got. I made sure of that, including the weight. And since I've gone 3 studs with good bolts like that, we've got a very strong arrangement here. So now I'm going to get a volunteer. We're going to hang up the screen. All right. And after I had the help of my lovely wife, there is a new TV. Just need to clean up the cables and maybe add a soundbar to that. And I'm all set. And doesn't that look nice and neat and tidy? Anyway, thank you. Hope this was helpful.